we are going to explore a highly optimistic, genuinely visionary roadmap for the future of humanity.
And we definitely need some optimism right now.
For sure. So we're diving into an article titled Emergence of a New Age. It's written by Acharya Shambhu-Shivananda Avadhuta, who's the Kupati, the chancellor of the Ananda Marga Gurukula. And this piece was published in the Gurukul Network magazine. And it essentially lays out a really comprehensive philosophical framework for what he calls a universal renaissance. Specifically, we're going to be digging into two major concepts today, Neohumanism and a socio-economic framework called PROU, which stands for Progressive Utilization Theory.
Now, just a quick map check for everyone before we really get into the weeds here. The source material we're looking at today contains some pretty intense critiques of our current global systems.
Yeah, it does not hold back.
Not at all. The author explicitly takes aim at modern capitalism, the whole idea of the nation state, and just the historical nature of empires in general. So, as your guides today, we just want to be clear that our goal isn't to take a political side or tell you to endorse this system.
Right. We're just analyzing the architecture of the ideas.
Exactly. Whether you're, a staunch free market person or a socialist or anything in between, we're just impartially breaking down this incredibly fascinating intellectual perspective to see how his blueprint for a new age actually works.
And honestly, it's just refreshing to read something this relentlessly progressive and optimistic. Like, he acknowledges the dark stuff, but his focus is totally on what he calls the Crimson Dawn.
The Crimson Dawn, yeah, it's a great image.
It really is.
Yeah.
But to understand where humanity is heading, according to this framework, we first have to understand the historical pattern of how we got stuck in the long, dark night in the first place.
Right. So the author starts with this macro-historical zoom out. He establishes this fundamental rule of history, which is that the old always, inevitably, yields to the new.
Right. It's just gravity.
Pretty much. He points to these massive empires, the Mongolian, the Ottoman, the Roman, the British, and he characterizes our current global setup as the American empire. And his point is that every single one of these structures eventually exhausted its utility and gave way to something else.
No matter how invincible they felt to the people living inside them at the time.
Exactly. And the mechanism for this change is what he calls a yuga parivartan.
A yuga parivartan. Let's unpack that term because it's so central to the whole piece.
So, in ancient Indian philosophy, a yuga is basically an epoch, a distinct era of civilization. And parivartan means a massive transformation or shift, but he's using it specifically to describe a total shift in collective psychology.
So it's not just like, oh, the treasury ran out of money or the army lost a battle.
No, it's way deeper. It's when the ruling ideology of the time literally stops serving the needs of the global citizens. He talks about how when a system can't facilitate human potential anymore, its collapse is just a dictum of history.
It's structurally inevitable.
Yes, and he actually brings up the story of Václav Havel to prove how fast this can happen.
Oh, that's such a wild historical moment.
It really is. I mean, here's a guy who goes from sitting in a freezing Czechoslovakian prison cell as a dissident playwright, totally at the mercy of a Soviet-backed regime that looked completely invincible.
And they had the military, the surveillance, everything.
Everything. But just weeks later, that regime just evaporates from the inside out. It wasn't an invading army. It was a yuga parivartan. The collective psychology just snapped, and Havel goes from prisoner to president almost overnight.
That is just wild. It's like, well, to use an analogy, it's like humanity is currently running on an outdated operating system.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. Like when an OS gets so old that it can no longer run the basic apps that society needs just to survive, you don't just get a glitch. You get a total system crash and a mandatory reboot. And that reboot, that yuga parivartan, isn't just likely, it's structurally inevitable. But how does that shift in collective psychology actually trigger the reboot?
Well, the author points to the specific era we're in right now, which he calls the Vaishyan Yuga.
The Vaishyan Yuga, which he translates as basically a capitalist era, right?
Yeah, exactly. And he says this era is characterized by being self-centered, matter-centered, and dogma-centered. He makes this fascinating argument that humans are inherently mind-predominant creatures.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning we have this massive capacity for intellectual expansion, altruism, wisdom, all these higher-level pursuits. But the Vaishyan Yuga traps us. It basically forces us to obsess over pure material accumulation.
So we're these highly evolved philosophical beings forced to just run on a hamster wheel for shiny objects.
Right. And because the system doesn't reward our true nature, people get stuck. The system demands that we act like hyper-competitive, resource-hoarding machines, which just leads to massive psychological alienation. It stops serving human needs.
So if a system crash is inevitable because our software is basically full of malware, what exactly are the specific bugs in our programming? Because the author points to some very specific sentiments that cause this.
He does. He dives into this concept of collective samskaras.
Samskara.
Yeah, so samskara is essentially a reactive momentum. It's group karma, or like an ingrained psychological habit that an entire society shares. And he argues that political leaders actually shape and reflect this group psychology.
Oh, interesting. So the leaders kind of institutionalize our worst habits.
Exactly. And the author breaks down 3 specific, really dangerous sentiments that act as these bugs in the system. The first one is religious sentiment.
Which he defines pretty strictly as an attachment to a belief system, right? Like dogma.
Yeah, it's not about your personal spiritual journey. It's about this exclusionary mindset of my path is the only truth and everyone else is an enemy.
Got it. And the second one is geo-sentiment.
Which is an intense attachment to a specific geographical area. So extreme nationalism, aggressive regionalism, the idea that my patch of dirt is inherently superior to your patch of dirt.
Right, which obviously causes a ton of conflict.
Yeah.
But it's the third sentiment that I think is going to trip some people up.
The species-centric sentiment.
Yeah, species-centric sentiment. He defines this as a complete lack of empathy for other species, basically caring only about human beings.
Yeah.
Now, I have to push back here gently for the sake of the listener.
Go for it.
Wait, isn't it completely natural for humans to care most about their own hometown or their own species? I mean, evolutionary biology tells us we're hardwired to protect our own genetic in-group.
Sure.
So how do we expect everyday people who are just trying to pay rent and survive to suddenly shed millions of years of evolutionary tribalism just to adopt this massive cosmopolitan outlook the author is demanding? It sounds a bit, utopian.
What's fascinating here is that the author doesn't deny the biology, but he's arguing that our context has fundamentally changed. Yes, when we were isolated, bands of hunter-gatherers, geosentiment and species-centrism were vital survival tools.
Right, kept us from getting eaten.
Exactly.
Wow.
But today we have highly interconnected global economies, we have thousands of nuclear weapons, we have an environment that is on the brink of collapse. So those exact same tribal sentiments are no longer keeping us alive, they are actively driving us toward extinction.
Oh, wow. So what used to be a survival mechanism is now a suicide pact.
Precisely. And the author gives a really stark warning. He says that when you combine political power with a lack of empathy, which is what these 3 sentiments create, the result is always ugly wars, environmental destruction, economic subjugation, and fascist dictatorial regimes.
I mean, you just described the evening news?
Exactly. It's not a coincidence. These aren't just abstract philosophical idea. They are the literal root causes of the scary scene and the total hopelessness that people are feeling right now.
So we have to make an evolutionary leap in consciousness. Yeah. Or we just aren't going to make it.
That's the argument. We have to update the software.
Okay, so if we know the bugs, geosentiment, self-interest, species centrism, how do we actually fix them? Because the text doesn't just complain, it actually offers 5 concrete principles for this new age.
Right, a literal blueprint.
And the first 2 principles radically redefine our relationship with the planet and with each other. Let's start with principle 1.
Principle 1 is a total paradigm shift. It's the move from ownership to custodianship.
Custodianship.
Yes. The concept here is that human beings do not own the Earth's wealth. We just don't. The Creator does. We are merely custodians, and our job is to optimize this wealth for all present and future generations.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you think about it, it's basically like renting an Airbnb.
Oh, I like that, right.
Like, you don't own the house, so you can't just take a sledgehammer and tear down the walls because you feel like it. You are legally and morally responsible for leaving it in good condition for the exact next guest who checks in after you.
That's a perfect analogy.
But practically speaking, does this author believe we need an entirely new legal framework to enforce this kind of planetary lease? Because right now, corporations definitely think they own the water and the land.
He absolutely does. And that's exactly why Principle 1 feeds directly into Principle 2, which introduces universal values.
Universal value.
Yeah. He asserts that nationalism is a fundamentally flawed outlook. You can't have planetary custodianship if the planet is carved up into hundreds of competing, heavily armed nations, all trying to hoard the resources for themselves.
Right, because the Airbnb guests are just fighting each other in the living room.
Exactly. So he calls for the establishment of global institutions that are based on the rule of law to entirely replace nationalistic competition.
So we're hearing about structural global integration.
Yes. And the most urgent part of this, the thing he emphasizes heavily, is the need for global security pacts to minimize global military budgets.
Wait, minimize global militaries? That is huge.
It's massive. He argues we have to redirect all those trillions of dollars currently spent on weapons and funnel that capital into economic empowerment and R&D for human welfare.
I mean, just think about the economic impact of that. The brightest engineering minds in the world, the vast amount of physical resources, the astronomical amounts of money, all of it is currently tied up in figuring out how to blow things up. If you redirected even half of that to global welfare, you could probably solve poverty in a decade. The text actually quotes Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, right?
Yes, it's a great quote. Guterres said, "It's time for the force of law to prevail over the law of force. It's time for diplomacy to prevail over war."
That perfectly sums it up. You can't be a custodian of the earth while you're dropping bombs on it.
Exactly. The psychological shift from owner to custodian changes everything about how a society functions. When no one claims ultimate ownership, the metric of success changes from how much can I extract to how well am I maintaining this for everyone else?
Which is a beautiful idea, but it immediately brings up a huge logistical question.
What's that?
Well, it's one thing to say we're all just custodians of the earth on a massive global theoretical scale. But how does that actually work in our day-to-day local economies? Like when I go to buy groceries or start a small business.
Right, the boots on the ground reality.
Exactly. And that brings us to the author's third principle, which is the economic engine of this whole vision, the concept of PRO sheet.
Yes. PRO-UTE, progressive utilization theory.
Read PRO-UTE as PROUT, right? Progressive utilization theory.
So the author introduces this with a really powerful framing. He states that massive disparities in wealth are actually the greatest slur on human intelligence.
The greatest slur on human intelligence. Wow, that is a sharp critique.
It is. He contrasts this with diversity. He says that diversity, like different cultures, languages, ideas, that enhances beauty. We need diversity. But massive economic disparity, that's just unintelligent. It's a failure of our collective brain to distribute resources rationally.
And his solution to this is pretty radical.
Extremely radical. The proposal is that no individual should be allowed to accumulate physical wealth without the clear permission and approval of collective bodies.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because when a listener hears wealth accumulation must be approved by a collective body, alarms might go off.
Sure.
That sounds a lot like heavy-handed state communism. And we know how centralized command economies usually end up. So how does he propose we do this without just creating a massive, corrupt bureaucracy?
The author totally anticipates this, which is why the core mechanism of PRO-UTE is regional self-reliance.
Regional self-reliance. How does that work?
Instead of a massive global bureaucracy micromanaging everything, the economy is highly decentralized. Local regions are empowered to produce their own essential goods, food, housing, basic manufacturing. This strengthens community resilience and keeps the wealth within the community that generated it, rather than it being siphoned off to a distant corporate headquarters.
Okay, but then he introduces this specific formula for peace. And this is where I need some clarification because it seems like a total paradox.
A formula, right.
Yeah. The author says the formula is political centralization plus economic decentralization plus the separation of political and economic power.
Right.
To the average listener, centralization usually sounds like a scary global monopoly, while decentralization sounds like, cute local farmers markets. How do those two exist at the exact same time without constantly clashing?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's actually an incredibly elegant system of checks and balances. So, political centralization is that global institution we talked about. It sets the universal human rights. It protects the planetary ecosystems. It prevents wars. It's the central referee.
Right. They write the big rules.
Exactly. But economic decentralization means that the actual production and management of wealth is handled entirely by local cooperatives. The global political body doesn't tell the local bakery how many loaves of bread to make.
Oh, I see.
And that leads to the final crucial part, the separation of political and economic power. Why do current systems get so corrupt in the Vaishyan Yuga?
Because the corporations basically buy the politicians.
Exactly. The people with the money write the laws to get more money. Pre-ROU creates a strict firewall. The people managing the local economic wealth have no authority to write global political policy, and the politicians writing the global policy have no control over the local economic wealth.
Oh, wow. It basically breaks the engine of legalized corruption.
Exactly. It makes it structurally impossible for a monopoly to buy a government.
That is a fascinating architecture. Okay, so we've solved the global borders, we've stopped the wars, and we've decentralized the local economies to ensure justice.
We've been busy.
We have. But a true new age isn't just about money and laws, right? It's about the internal human experience. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle.
Right? Principles 4 and 5, these are all about rational spirituality, ecology, and the inner life.
Let's start with principle 4. The author calls for rational spirituality. Now, earlier we talked about how religious sentiment is a dangerous bug in the system. How is this different?
He makes a very clear distinction. Religion as a dogmatic institution should be a strictly private affair. You can believe what you want, but it shouldn't dictate public policy.
Right.
But rational spirituality is about promoting a mysticism that fosters a cosmic fraternity. It's a deep sense of universal connection, but, and this is key, it must be cultivated alongside a rational outlook through the sciences, the arts, and humanities.
So it's not anti-science at all.
Not even a little bit. It's the synthesis of scientific inquiry and deep empathy. And a huge part of this cosmic fraternity involves our relationship with nature, tying back to the danger of that species-centric sentiment.
Right, because if we only care about humans, we destroy the biosphere.
Exactly. So the text explicitly mandates the building of massive sanctuaries for flora and fauna. We have to legally and physically protect the natural world from human extraction.
Which flows perfectly into principle 5.
Yeah.
Health and ecology.
Yeah. This principle highlights the intimate, unbreakable connection between our food, our nutrition, our physical health, ecology, and what he calls an ideal lifestyle.
It sounds like a completely holistic prescription for civilization, like a holistic fitness routine, you know?
How do you mean?
Well, it's like the author saying you can't just fix society's diet like the PRO key economics without also fixing its mental health through rational spirituality and its environment through deep ecology. If you go to the gym but eat garbage and never sleep, you're still going to be sick.
That is spot on. You cannot separate human physical health from the health of the soil or the equity of the economic system. It's all one interwoven fabric.
And he gives this ultimate motto for global transformation that I just love. He says the goal is simple living and sublime thinking.
Simple living and sublime thinking. It's so elegant.
What does that actually look like in practice, though?
Well, as our material needs become simpler and more decentralized through PROUT, meaning we aren't obsessed with endless stressful consumption, our intellectual and spiritual pursuits can become vastly more expansive.
So we aren't spending 80 hours a week hustling just to buy a bigger TV.
Right. And because we aren't trapped in that Vaishyan Yuga hamster wheel, human genius is freed up. The author notes that science and technology will no longer be used for war or accumulation. They will strictly be utilized for universal welfare.
It's like we finally get to use our big brains for something other than figuring out how to exploit each other.
Exactly. We finally get to engage in sublime thinking.
Wow. Okay, so let's bring this all together. This has been a massive journey. We started by looking at the crumbling of old empires and this chaotic transition period, the Yuga Parivartan.
And we saw how shedding those toxic sentiments, geosentiments, species sentiment, is mandatory for our survival.
Right. And then we walked through this incredibly detailed blueprint, shifting from ownership to planetary custodianship, defunding the war machine, capping massive wealth disparities through PROUT, and decentralizing the economy so local communities can thrive.
All supported by an internal shift toward rational spirituality and holistic ecology.
It really is a master plan for a highly empathetic, completely rational global society. And the ultimate goal mentioned in the text is the establishment of Neohumanism. It's the crimson dawn of a universal renaissance where all nations live like kith and kin under eternal dharma.
It's a beautiful vision. But the author actually leaves us with one final, totally mind-expanding concept that we have to mention.
Oh, the cosmic conclusion. Yes, lay it on them.
So at the very end, he suggests that getting our own planet in order isn't actually the finish line. He says that once we achieve this peaceful, scientific, neo-humanist society, We will then, and I'm quoting here, connect with life on other stars and create a blissful universal family and one cosmic society.
One cosmic society. I mean, wait, really?
Yeah.
It's like he's saying that Earth is basically under quarantine right now. Like, we
Right.
can't join the galactic community until we stop acting like violent toddlers and actually clean up our room.
That's exactly it. We have to mature as a species first.
That is just incredible. It gives the whole struggle for justice so much more weight. Now, if you are listening to this and you feel as energized by this blueprint as we are, and you want to learn more about making the world a better place for all beings, a place with actual happiness and justice, you absolutely need to explore neo-humanism.
Highly recommend it.
You can go to theneohumanist.com. That's theneohumanist.com. And be sure to check out the Neo-Humanist Review, which is a leading journal of progressive ideas that promotes rational thinking and a deep regard for all beings. It is exactly the kind of sublime thinking we need right now.
It really is a fantastic resource.
But, as always, we can't let you go without a final provocative thought. We've talked a lot today about how historical empires fall and how an outdated operating system has to crash to make way for a new era.
A Yuga Paravartan.
Right. And if the software update for humanity's next era depends entirely on us shifting from isolated self-interest to a massive cosmic neo-humanist perspective, well, what is one geo-sentiment or species sentiment that you hold today that you would be willing to give up tomorrow to make that transition happen?
It's a tough question.
It is. But think about it. Until next time, keep diving deep.